Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at the equity loan help to buy scheme and why I think it is terrifically overvalued and going to cause a lot of problems in the very near future. Let's start with what is the equity loan portion of the help to buy scheme. The help to buy equity loan is a loan that the government introduced in 2013. George Osborne brought it in. It allows you to borrow money off the government to buy certain types of buildings, typically new builds, and you can borrow up to 20% of the value of the home or 40% if you live in London, which means you don't have to put down 5% in London and you could add 40% onto your deposit and borrow that money interest free for 5 years. Sounds like a good deal. And in some cases, it can be an excellent deal because it gets you on the ladder. And the last 5 years, property prices have done quite well in London. The problem is, after 5 years, what really is important to know is that the interest rate that goes onto that equity loan portion becomes inflation plus 1%. So if you've borrowed 40% of the value of a home, say it's £450,000 around, so that's what, £200,000 you've borrowed off the government interest free. Now you may have paid off some of that. Probably you haven't paid much off at all, but you will then need to go onto that tracker rate for that equity loan portion. To avoid doing that, most people typically will remortgage and they will try and pay off the government portion if they can, because they might own about 10% of the house by then. And that really relies on a couple of things. Is interest rates staying the same, very, very low, which they haven't. Wages increasing, which some people have increased their wages. Like if you're in your early 20s and by the time you're in your late 20s, typically you might be making more money. And so you then should be able to borrow more and you should be able to pay off that loan portion. So for some people, that worked quite well and has worked quite well. The problem is that interest rates have risen drastically. So your ability to borrow has gone right down. So when people get to the end of their fix, they're not going to own enough. First, they're only going to own maybe 8 to 10% of the house, but they couldn't afford that house in the first place, really, without that loan, that equity loan from the government. So suddenly, they're going to need to borrow a huge amount of money. And interest rates are now 5.5%, 6%. So if they couldn't afford it before, they definitely can't afford it now. And that is where the problem is going to come in. This is compounded by the fact that the government are involved, so everything's pretty slow and rubbish. So the paperwork you actually need to fill out in order to pay off the equity loan portion, remortgage and refinance, everything like that, there's a huge delay. Some people are waiting 6 to 9 months. So people are trapped in these contracts. And I foresee a lot of people being trapped, people whose wages haven't increased much, or people who bought in a very highly inflated area. Which brings us to my sort of final point, is that the reason I think this whole thing is a bubble is that as soon as this equity loan was brought in, builders started building properties designed for this loan. Those properties were valued above the market typically, because the one thing that dictates the price of a house tends to be the availability of capital, of money. And this loan allowed people to have a lot more money with a lot fewer checks. And for the builders, they got a good deal because they could increase the price and sell it at a much higher price than they would in a normal market. And it's government backed. So the demand was pretty much always there. They didn't have to worry about going too high in price. They still had to worry a bit, but not that much. So if you bought a property that was 20% over the market value, as opposed to what you'd normally buy in the normal housing stock in that area, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble, because as prices come down, the ones that are going to be hit are going to be those 2-bedroom flats that are 400 grand, 500 grand in London. Especially, I think 1-bedrooms, and you may have a cladding issue, but that's a whole separate thing. But there's a lot of reasons for those things to drop in value at the moment. And so my advice would be, although I can't give financial advice, if I'm in that situation, I would probably try and hold firm, if I could, and kind of look for other options. But I'd seriously have to consider moving into somewhere I could afford, somewhere cheaper, because I really wouldn't want to get stuck in a negative equity cycle and a long term. If I'm going to get stuck on the equity loan, 1% plus inflation that I think increases every year after that as well, then I would absolutely want to escape that. So that's my reasoning for why I think this is a bubble and why I think it's going to pop. Now, interest rates have risen so quickly, and with inflation being high at the same time, yes, that may change in the next 6 months, but one or two of them are going to remain the same. But at the moment, it's the perfect storm where if you were remortgaging right now, you're really going to be in a world of hurt. So I hope you found this useful. Just something to think about moving forward. And yeah, let me know your thoughts. If you're in this situation at the moment, do let me know in the comments. I'd be interested to hear what people are doing. And if it's worked out well for you, if it hasn't. This is just my thoughts looking at the numbers and kind of, I'm hearing a few stories, but I haven't got hard data on any of this because it's all a bit disjointed. So I hope you enjoyed this video, even if it has been a bit glib. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.